I guess some of the earlier things, for sure, and you see this through Milk and Honey, were how I was being treated as a woman in my world and how the women around me were being treated. And that sort of tension between them having to fight for their space was really what pushed me into writing poetry.
Welcome everyone back to the School of Greatness podcast. Very excited about where we are right now. We're in Toronto and I'm with Rupi Kaur. So thank you so much
Thank you for having me.
welcome me into your city, and I'm excited to do this. We met a couple months ago in Los Angeles at the YouTube space. There was an event that Lily Singh was putting on, and we were both there on different panels.
Yeah.
And that's when I really started to learn more about you and became fascinated with your story, your work, and how many people you've been impacting. It's been amazing what you've been up to, and all of my followers, especially the female followers, love you. So I'm excited to share with them this interview. And you've got a new book out called The Sun and Her Flowers, which is out now. So make sure you guys go get this book. It's really cool. And you had another book that came out a couple years ago, correct?
Yes.
And what was that one called?
So the first book that I released was called Milk and Honey, and I actually self-published the first one in 2014, and later on in 2015 it was picked up by a publisher and brought kind of worldwide to all bookstores.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And were you doing Instagram before that and kind of just sharing your poetry?
Yeah. Instagram was actually the last kind of social media platform I was practicing with.
Really?
The first one was like, for years I had kind of like a private blog for my like paintings and my artwork, because I was like, that's the direction I want to go in. And eventually that turned into more of a poetry blog where I would actually record the poetry. And like, I kept trying these different mediums.
Like spoken word.
Yeah. But like nothing was sticking until I think I came up with the concept of kind of the design or visual elements of what you see on Instagram today. Yeah.
Now, there's not many mainstream poets in the world, right? There's not many people who have a massive following who are doing poetry. Are there others that you know of?
There are a few.
There are?
There are. Or maybe because, I know it's just like the world that I'm from. But you're right. Like in the mainstream world of thing, like poetry doesn't really, it's not there. It's not the thing that, you're going to get together with friends on Friday night and talk about, right? Yeah.
So how do you think you made this kind of mainstream?
I have no idea. Is it even mainstream?
I think
it
what
is, that's
you've
cool.
done is picked up in a massive way for so many people where they're just obsessed with your information, your lessons. And I think what we're talking about before is you were mentioning how you still don't have anything figured out.
No.
And it's so a way for you to like kind of express what you're going through, right?
Yeah.
At the time. Is that how you do your poetry?
Yeah. It's like I said before, it's all just a side effect of what's happening in life, and the poetry is the response. Like things happen around you, we all respond to them. And I have very emotional responses to a lot of things that are going on, and poetry is emotion for me. And so I always say that the poems actually write themselves in my mind and in my body before they're out on paper. So I kind of already know what I'm about to write. The poem's already done by the time I get to, my pen, paper, and to the table to write it out.
You thought of it in your mind.
Yeah.
You started speaking it out to yourself.
Kind of. Or it's like, when a song is on the radio and it's so irritating, but it plays on and on and on in your head and you can't get it out. There's a lot of poems that kind of came to life that way. It was like a 13-line thought that just kept going and going, and it was like, write me. And I was like, no, like nobody cares about you. Like you are not an interesting thought. And it's funny because like eventually I have to write it down just to get it out of my system and move on to something else. But it's those pieces, the ones that are, write me. They're the ones that I think people really enjoy the most.
But you've written, hundreds, thousands of these
thousands.
shorter little poems, right? Thousands?
I think that when I go into maybe even thousands now, because it's kind of like my writing process is very fluid and very natural. I free write every single day. It's kind of like journaling. And so sometimes a thought is 2 lines. Sometimes it's 3 pages. And only when it kind of something just jumps right at me will I then take it, transport it to like a phone or a laptop actually, and then edit, revise.
Yeah.
But I usually, like when I started to write The Sun and Her Flowers, and was like, yeah, like I just signed a book deal, now I have to do this.
Yeah.
I had to print out all the work that I had done. And in my mind, I was like, you suck. Like you have done nothing for the past 2 years. How are you gonna write a book?
Except sell 1 million copies.
I know. And that's what I'm battling with right now. Like I'm unable to sit with all I've done, and I keep pushing myself to do more, which I don't think it's been like a very healthy experience. But I arrived at writing this book with hundreds and hundreds of pages already written. Of stuff that I'd been just, journaling for the past couple of years. Yeah.
Do you feel pressure to kind of do better than what you did before in the
Oh
previous
my
book?
God, so much. It's just so...
Because it kind of just took off, right? You sold over, is it 1 million copies? Is what?
2 million.
2 million copies
now
you sold?
It's 2 million and
Holy
still
cow.
going strong. Like, it just,
That's
I think
pretty-
2 weeks ago it was back on #1 on New York Times bestseller list, and it's been going for over 70 weeks. And it's like a train that won't stop, and you're like, okay, like, we need to refill the gas tank. You need to stop. But it's like, nope. And it just keeps going and going and going. It's been wild.
So how do you set yourself up for this then, emotionally, for not being attached to the results? Because I'm assuming you wanted to do well, you wanted to sell as well, or maybe better, or you have expectations, right? So how do you...
Kind of like, I think I had expectations and pressure in like 2 different ways, in terms of I pressure myself through the art, and then even put myself and compare myself to the first book. And so one reason that I think that I waited so long and finally became ready to share this was because I didn't really want to create Milk and Honey #2. That's so unfair to a book that's given me so much. And I didn't want to, kind of reproduce and repackage it and just send that out into the world. And it took time to really come into like a whole different world, which is The Sun and Her Flowers. And that's what I wanted to do, right? Like I wanted to create something different but still stay true to the roots. But the funny thing is, when I started to write The Sun and Her Flowers, I was like, oh, no. This isn't the same. Now what's gonna happen? Like everyone's gonna be like, we didn't come here for this. And there was that fear as well. And then it's so funny because our idea of success becomes so skewed. So I was so unable to write for so long. It felt like I had my hands tied behind my back, because I told myself this book would not be a success unless it also sold 2 million copies.
Right.
Minimum, if not more. And that it also was, got the same accolades and awards that Milk and Honey did.
Hit #1 and all these other things.
And I was like, that for months it left me like unable to be creative and unable to make anything, and I would just like curl up into a ball and cry all the time. But I think that's so unfair, and that's so unfair. It's unfair to the art. It's unfair to the people that we share it with and to ourselves.
Yeah, I had Liz Gilbert on Eat, Pray, Love. Do you know Liz? And she had mentioned how, her first Eat, Pray, Love was this massive hit. There's a movie with
that TED Talk,
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
And her TED Talk
it helped me
about
through so much.
how she was like, my best work is behind me probably, or how it's, how am I ever going to do this again? And being okay with it and just working on the art. So why did you, you talked about, the art and the poems come from how you're feeling in the world, right? From different things you're reacting to. What was the earlier things in your life when you started doing poetry that you were reacting to? What were those things in the world?
I guess some of the earlier things, for sure, and you see this through Milk and Honey, were how I was being treated as a woman in my world, and how the women around me were being treated. And that sort of tension between them having to fight for their space was really what pushed me into writing poetry. So I was writing a lot about, early on, it was, I think 100% of my poems were about the domestic violence that women experience, whether it was within my community or other communities, or the sexual abuse that I saw the sisters around me experience. So it was really just fighting and trying to navigate those issues, I think. I never thought that I'd be able to write love poetry or heartbreak poetry, or even like in this new book, there's like pieces about death and so many other expansive topics. But that point when I started out, I was like, I will never be able to write anything other than this because I needed to navigate that so much. Yeah.
Was there anything you were facing personally, or was it more experiences from other friends and family members?
So it was definitely some things I was also experiencing, but it was also what other people were experiencing. And everybody always asks, like, okay, is this page about you, or is it about like your cousin or your sister? But I always tell readers, like, I think it's unfair if I tell you what's what, because I want you to see yourself in the work. That's most important. That's the point of sharing, I think. Yeah.
Well, what are some of the moments that are intimate and personal to you? Can you share some of those? Or where you felt maybe you were attacked in a certain way or judged in a certain way, where you started expressing on personal things?
Yeah, so you mean in the poetry or in general in life?
In general.
Okay. So I guess in like all the themes that I cover, I've always had some sort of like very personal experience with that. And if we're talking about violence, I was with somebody who was extremely violent to me at a very young age in a relationship, and so a lot of chapter 3 covers those grounds. And then there's like
early teens.
Early teens, and then
Was this an older person who was violent, or
kind of? Really? I was like, oh, I'm in love, but it's because my concept of love at that moment, like I was so hungry for affection because I'd never experienced any.
Really?
That anybody who gave me anything. And I feel like these people, they know exactly who to find and who to prey on. And so I was stuck in this thing for like a very long time and unable to kind of let go. But it was actually when I let go of that experience, I think I let go of it in like the 12th grade, and that's when I turned to writing 100%. And I like within that month, I was doing things I would never do. Like going to open mic nights and performing my poetry, when in fact I was very much like fly on the wall and like to be invisible.
Yeah.
And then there's like other parts where you'll see in Milk and Honey, I do write a lot about like body hair and those kind of things. And like that's been a really big issue in general, just being a woman, but even like being a brown woman, and we have like dark black hair and a lot of it sometimes. And so being picked on by women and men, and really trying to battle myself, because I think there was battling other people was one thing, but really questioning myself, like, why am I doing this? Like, wouldn't I have more fun just running around outside rather than me being up in here, like waxing for hours? And so really coming to terms with my own beauty standards rather than accepting what society's pushed on me as like what's normal. Because it's normal in their eyes to not have any, but the universe says that it's absolutely normal. It's growing back for a reason. Right. Yeah, so I kind of like, even in the pieces that, I might not have experienced, or it's my mom's experience or my sister's, there's always a little personal touch to it. I'm always able to kind of
resonate in some way.
Yeah.
It's affected you personally somehow.
Of course, yeah.
Maybe not as dramatic as someone else's experience. But
exactly.
How did you feel like you were able to get out of this relationship that wasn't really supporting you?
Oh my God, I don't know.
Was it physically abusive or verbally abusive, or just holding you back in certain ways?
All the abuses there are. I'm physically, emotionally, mentally, sexually, like all the abuses wrapped up with a really bow with like thorns on it.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, not a pretty bow.
No, not a pretty one. And I still sometimes, it's so funny because the human mind is such an interesting thing, because there are so many days I wake up now and I'm like, that happened? Because my mind has like blacked out those memories. And there are some moments where, I will be writing a piece and some memories do come back, and I'll go into a panic, like, oh my God, that was real. And I have to calm myself down. But I really think it was a miracle that saved me, because at the point that I got out of it, like I didn't have support from anywhere. Like my friends had turned on me. Like I didn't have any like
Why did they
support
turn on
from because this guy was just like brainwashing everyone, including me most of all, and just isolating me from my loved ones, whether that was family and everything. And I was at for somebody so young to experience such trauma, I was not in my own anymore. And so I wasn't able to, like I had a very weak like mental state at that moment. And so I always say like it was really a miracle that saved me, because there was like rock bottom was here and then I was here.
Really?
Like I didn't even there was no reason to live, for me at least.
Wow.
And that's what I thought. But something happened. And I remember a cousin of mine named Guggen, who I love so much. She was one of the few people to give it to me straight. Everyone else would be like, I had a couple of very strong friends and they'd always like, be there to hold me. But she came in and she was like, I am sick of this shit. She's like, I am so tired
of hearing you for like a year or whatever.
For like 3 years. Oh, really? This guy is an awful human being and I am done. And she just yelled at me.
So you were still with him during this process?
At this point, we had it was interesting because he would ask me to do something I was very uncomfortable with, and then the cycle would begin. I would say no, and he would get me to do it by like leaving me and like cutting me out for 2 weeks. And then of course I would end up giving in, because that like, it was like an addiction. It's like a drug, right?
Yeah, of course.
And so this was like another one of his things. He was like, all right, leaving. And I was like, oh no, like it's fine. Like convincing myself that I should just do whatever it is. And she was like, no, like I am not having it anymore. And something clicked right then in the middle of, there was like love in that. Like in her passion, in her anger was like so much love, and something clicked in me and was like, oh, we're never turning back. And I never did. And that's why I say it was a miracle, because I don't know how it happened, but the universe, something aligned and was like, okay, we're done.
I think if we get to a point where it's just enough is enough.
Enough is enough.
Enough pain,
exactly.
It's like, okay, I'm just
it was like,
over suffering.
Yeah, and it's like, there's nothing left to lose now. Like the only way we can go is up, and that's it. So it was like baby steps.
Wow.
And up we went.
Would you say that time was kind of like the lowest moments for you, or the darkest moments for you, or?
It's funny because I think so. But then
then the next guy. No,
oh yeah, but
really?
not really. I don't think anything, hopefully, will repeat itself to be as traumatic as that moment. Because it was so prolonged and there was so much mess and stuff. Like, I think I've shared probably 0.2% of it, not even. Maybe I will one day share more through my writing. But it's funny because once we experience something and once we overcome it, we almost forget how difficult it was when you put time like with that gap. And especially because my mind is like really just blacked out so many of those memories. But I think we go through different versions of suffering. And one thing I really have seen in the last like year or two, and I do write about it in The Sun and Her Flowers, is that the idea of like becoming your own enemy, and me becoming that in the last little while, is almost more painful than any external factors trying to attack me. And I tried not to write about that because I was like, who cares about that? But I ended up writing an entire chapter about it, and it's what I've really taught myself in the last 2 years. Like, I worked so hard on, trying to really respond to these other negative factors, but then it came to a point where I became my own worst enemy. And that was probably the most painful, and is the most painful thing of all.
Wow. Do you think you'd be able to have as much an impact without going through that much challenge, pain, suffering? Do you think your work would be as powerful?
I don't know. I don't even know if I would be writing if it weren't for those moments, right?
So are you grateful for that experience?
I am. Like, I would say I have no regrets. Even like before that, there's been things, and after that, there's been things, but I've taught myself like there are no regrets, and all things happen for a reason. And a wonderful thing that I do, I don't know if it's healthy or not, is like anytime something terrible happens, I always respond to it with art. So
with art.
exactly. So going through that and ending that, responded with I responded with that by going to my first ever like open mic night and starting to do this thing on a regular basis. I don't know if I would have done that otherwise. And I remember there's other things that happened after that. And every time things went wrong, I would just do something else. Like then I started a blog and then something else went wrong. And then I was like, okay, whatever, like I'm gonna start doing this. And then I started my Instagram and then other things went wrong. And it was like life became so bad that I was like, forget about it. I'm just gonna publish this goddamn book because that's how I kind of deal with stuff and like work through things. I have to keep myself really busy.
Wow, it's like your therapy, yeah.
It is.
Do you feel like you have to go through challenges every single year to create then? Do you think
no.
you'll be able to create from a place of love?
I think so. And that was a challenge. Like after the success of Milk and Honey, like I gained a lot of stability that I didn't have, that my family didn't have.
Like financial stability.
Financial stability, emotional stability. You know, it's interesting because I came to a place that there was lots of love and everything had settled finally after so long. And it was a moment that I'd been looking forward to forever. It's a moment that you would dream of. But then I was scared because I was like, oh my God, but like if I'm not suffering, then how will I write again, you know? And then I would like go out and search for suffering and create situations and
sabotage
you know,
yourself
I'd be like trying to like fight with my friends just to be like, yeah, like it's gonna give me something, you know, like move me. But what I realized was like, that's so not true. And that's like working from a place of trauma and suffering, and we do not have to do that anymore. And it is very possible to write from a place of love. It's just we have to teach ourselves how to do that. Because for so long, what I did, like we learned to teach ourselves to write through the suffering because that's what we're trying to write through. And now I have to like reprogram myself to write through a place of like love or happiness or whatever that is. Because it's so possible.
Why didn't you feel like you had the acceptance or the acknowledgement or the love or the friendship or the support growing up?
I definitely had the friendship. I think I've always been so fortunate to have a group. Sometimes it was one person, sometimes it was three, but a small group of really, really, really strong women around me who were always there to hold me and support me. And you see that love in my writing. But I come from, you know, a South Asian family, and sometimes we find it very difficult to say I love you or talk about our feelings. Like those things don't happen. It's kind of like very like rigid. And so growing up in America, like I don't know how my experience, like my cousin's experiences growing up in India are probably different because that's the system they're used to. But growing up here, it was like, okay, this is how it is at home. But then when I go to school, I see all the other parents hugging their kids and being like, oh, I love you, and patting them on their head. And I'm like, oh, does that mean my parents don't love me? And so that was really, really challenging because my parents love me beyond words. And that's, you know, but they can't say that. But instead they show it in different ways.
They couldn't say I loved you.
No, they can't say it.
They can't. Still.
No, it's like not, they don't say it. But then you have to really look for it in their actions, and it's always there. Whether it's like my dad calling me every single day and being like, are you okay? Is anyone bothering you? And you know, that's what he thinks of like while he's like on the road. He's a truck driver, and so he's like on the road, and he's always like calling me, and he's coming up with ideas for like all this stuff and making sure that I'm okay. And or even like him, he's never been like, oh, I am so proud of you for writing this book or whatever it is,
never
right?
said that.
But I think the man carries around 100 copies of the book in a backpack because now every time I go to a grocery store or like a bank or something like that in Brampton, Brampton's my hometown, they'll all be like, oh my God, hey, like how's it going? Like your dad was in here, he told us all this, like congratulations. And so I'm like, oh my God, Dad, you're embarrassing me.
It's great. It's what he's supposed to do though.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
What do you think is the difference between surviving and living fully?
I don't know if there's a difference between them. Aren't they kind of like the same thing? I used to think that when this was when I was a lot younger, that you would get to a certain place where you survived everything and then you could just be happy. And I realized that that's not the way it is anymore. Living means to survive, whether it's small battles or big battles, there's always battles.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest challenge that you face right now with everything that's happening in the world? What's the thing that's affecting you the most?
Me.
Whether it's happening to you or just
it's
the
happening
world.
in me.
Yes. I mean, maybe
Like,
not something's attacking you,
yeah,
but like
yeah,
in the
yeah.
world, you're seeing things happen.
Yeah.
What's having the biggest effect on you?
I think I've had to really unplug from what's sometimes going on in the world, because what I do and what a lot of other people do is like, oh my goodness, this is happening, and it's a buildup, and we're like, we need to know, is there justice? Is there going to be justice? So for so long, I would have my phone over here, and I would just be like freaking out, because you want to make change happen, and you're like, what can I do? How can I help? What can I do? What can I help? And for me, it just became really, really bad for my mind, because I was like, okay, I'm not doing enough. I should be out there. I should be protesting. I should be doing this. I should be, giving more money to that and more money over here. And then I had to just be like, okay, we need to breathe, and we need to meditate, and we need to relax and unplug. And so I've done that. And that's my way of like unplugging, making sure that I'm mentally at a point where I can actually offer some sort of sustainable assistance and allyship and help.
Do you think it's possible to end our suffering?
No, I think that suffering and pain, suffering and joy are the exact same thing. They're like married to one another, like life and death. And that's why whenever suffering comes, I like welcome it. It actually makes me excited, because I'm like, okay, happen to me. Because you know what? At the end of you, it's like the moon and the sun. One goes down, the other rises. So suffering will come up, but eventually it's going to go for a little nap, and then the joy comes. It's going to go for a little nap, and I think it's like very, very cyclical. Yeah. So I think there cannot be one without the other.
Do you think we need suffering?
Of course.
Really?
I think that if there wasn't suffering, would we really, really appreciate the joy? I don't think so.
Well, I think we could also experience adversity and challenges and not have to suffer through them.
I think
where we're like paralyzed and just like,
no,
how do I get out of this dark place?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think my version of suffering is definitely not like, oh my God, we're in this dark place. But like challenges and adversity.
Adversity and challenges, yes. Absolutely.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I mean.
What do you think we can do to set ourselves up to win on a daily basis? To be more grounded, grateful, even in chaos that's happening in our lives?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is like taking responsibility. First, you take responsibility, and then you forgive yourself. Because it's hard to take responsibility, because then you can fall into the pattern of being like, oh, I took responsibility of this thing. Oh my God, it's all my fault. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? But you have to take responsibility and be like, okay, it's okay. Yeah, it's fine. This happens to everybody. And it's taking responsibility of the little things. I think like those are what boggle us down the most. It's like when we get upset at other people or other things for not doing the things we should have done for ourselves. And so if we can take responsibility for that and then forgive ourselves, then I think we can move in a more positive way. Yeah.
Is there anything you haven't forgiven yourself for?
I am currently working on forgiving myself for being too hard on myself. Yeah. I think that's the only thing I'm working on that I have not forgiven myself for.
Why haven't you?
Because I didn't really know. I thought that being so difficult on yourself was like a good thing, which it is, but to a certain limit. And I think I crossed that limit to a point where everything that I did, I saw it as like not good enough or just in a really negative light. Like I finished writing The Sun and Her Flowers, and then everyone was like, okay, like you should just relax and take a break. And so then I was like, okay, let me go do that. And so for a week, not even for a week, I think it was the second day in where I was just trying to do the whole Netflix and hanging out thing. Okay. And I had a breakdown, and I was like, oh my God, I've accomplished nothing. This entire year, what did I do? I just sat around all the time. I just ate, and I just watched movies, and everyone around me was like, but like, didn't you just finished writing an entire book? And that's when I was like, oh, okay, like now we're getting carried away. So now I'm backtracking and really trying to figure out why I do or say these things to myself and how I can really fix that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is there anything else in the world you haven't forgiven?
I don't know. I feel like that responding to that will require deeper thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Will require art.
Yeah.
How can we start to love ourselves if we are stuck in this cycle of self-hatred?
I think that the self-hatred is always like, it goes back to thought. And what I've been learning from the people around me is that you have to go back to the thought and fix the thought first. And
What does that mean? Like change the story about the thought?
or first of all, be aware of the thought. Like, be aware of the fact that these are the thoughts you're having and that they're negative or whatever they are. And once you become more self-aware of them, then how can we change them? And then thoughts, like, it's all kind of a pattern, you know?
Yeah.
Thoughts, if you can change your thoughts, they'll affect your actions, and then how you feel about yourself, and then how you treat other people, and it's all like a chain of events. But I think it all goes back to thought. Yeah.
I'd love for you to read a poem,
Yeah.
can you?
Yes.
I
Okay.
think you had one picked out, right?
Yep. It's one of my favorites.
And what's the context behind this one?
The context is...
When did you write it? What were you feeling?
Yeah. So this is what happened. 2 stories. When Milk and Honey was published through AMP in 2015, it was November. And after that, I wasn't able to write for a year. Like, I think life changed so quickly, and I did not know, and I was not equipped with the tools to deal with that. And so I wasn't able to practice my art. And that was really challenging, because then I went into a really dark place, because I was like, oh my God, it just started and it's already over. Like, I'll never be able to create again, and it was so scary.
Right.
And whereas, you know, everybody else around me, the publishers, the agents, all the folks, the wonderful team that I have, they were like nudging me, and they were like, oh, so like about that second book though,
Yeah.
you want to work on this like deal or not? And all these people online were like, you know, you don't post work online anymore. You know, you're gonna be forgotten. Someone else is gonna replace you. And I was like, oh my God, sick. I couldn't move out of bed for days. And so that's what inspired this piece. And a conversation that one of my really good friends had with a woman who was 50. And she was like, life is the greatest thing now than it's ever been before. And that really opened my lens up. Because before that, I was living in a place of what those people were saying, that you better grasp your moment right now or it's all gonna be gone.
Yeah.
Whereas this woman was like, life just started and it's a freaking ball and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And so I wrote this piece, and it's called Timeless. They convinced me I only had a few good years left before I was replaced by a girl younger than me. As though men yield power with age, but women grow into irrelevance. They can keep their lies, for I have just gotten started. I feel as though I just left the womb. My 20s are the warm-up for what I'm really about to do. Wait till you see me in my 30s. Now that will be a proper introduction to the nasty, wild woman in me. How can I leave before the party started? Rehearsals begin at 40. I ripen with age. I do not come with an expiry date. And now, for the main event, curtains up at 50. Let's begin the show.
I like it. That's
Thank
cool.
you. Yeah, we snap.
Poetry slams. I want to ask you a few more questions before we finish up, but I'm curious, is there any question you wish people would ask you more that they don't ask?
No.
No. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like I get a lot of questions, and I try to answer all of them.
Good.
But do you think there's any questions that people don't really ask me?
I'm just curious, you know, I never know what people, is there anything you wish you could talk more about that you don't feel like you get to talk about, or that people miss? You know, maybe they're not asking, maybe there's something that you're really thinking about in your mind a lot that people just aren't aware of, that you wish they would ask you about.
Yeah.
Or you wish you would talk about more.
I think I really enjoy talking about kind of the process of writing and the process of designing, and like just, and maybe I haven't found the space to like talk about all of that, but for me, poetry is the words, but it's also like so much more than that. And it's about how a book feels, and the paper, and the texture, and the color.
Aesthetic,
and I always want to
everything, yeah.
create an entire universe. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you had this unique I feel like everyone's tried to copy this now. This
No.
stuff, you know what I mean, right?
I was definitely not the first person to create it, but
But it's like so clean, and then you do all your own drawings, right?
I
all
do
your
illustrate
paintings,
it.
your
Yeah.
illustrations.
Yeah.
And is it bad if I call it drawing? Is that like
No.
Okay. I'm like an
No.
ignorant artist.
No. That's also one thing. Everyone is like super scared to just be open around me because they're like, oh no, no, no. We
You're
gotta
gonna
like
offend
be
someone.
like, you know, we can't offend her. And like, but I'm like, dude, it's chill. Say whatever you want.
And were you always into art at a very young age as well?
Yeah, I've been drawing. I used to actually do like very hyper-realistic sketches and like acrylic painting since I was like from the age of 5, and I always thought that that would be my like line of work. But then I found poetry, and the reason I brought the illustrations in was because I felt like I cheated on my like first love. And I like found this like new sexy form who like captivated all of my attention, and I was like, this is a little bit unfair now because I left the art behind, and and then I brought the idea of the illustrations and married the two.
I think it's powerful. I mean, especially to kind of go on a different topic. There's so many people who are artists or musicians who feel like they can't make money or can't build a business or can't do something, and you're doing short little poems with little illustrations, and you're making a lot of money and building a massive brand and audience around something that people think you can't do, which I think is just a powerful example.
I think that if we shed what it is, whether it's the poetry, the illustrations, or everything, I think anything if done with real honesty is gonna work. And like with the poetry, it's like the poetry is just one medium of me expressing myself, but I think that the reason it's worked is not because of the illustrations, not because it's short, or not because it's packaged in a certain way. I think it's because it's me being so honest with myself. And that's what I hear from readers all the time. Like, this is exactly what I was feeling or thinking, but I just like didn't know how to say it. And so that type of honesty really can get you far. And you see that in musicians and painters and dancers and like all the arts. Yeah.
And do you have a routine in the morning, or where you are writing every single day at a certain time, or to help you cultivate this, or is it just comes at random and you just get it out of you?
In my dream world, I wake up every day and I have a light breakfast, and then I have my tea, and then nobody calls me, nobody bothers me. I don't have email going like beep, 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 beep. And I sit and I have like 2 to 3 hours to just calmly write.
That's never happened, probably.
It hasn't happened in the last little while. It gets difficult because then it's like you're trying to juggle. For me, I think the challenge is I'm trying to juggle maintaining the art and the creativity, which is the root of everything, and that is the most important thing to me. But also now managing this business that just happened to appear, and I have to take advantage of that and really cultivate that as well. And so learning how to balance that with like developing a team and creating
How to manage people, hire people, everything.
Yeah.
Were you working before, or were you in college when this all?
I published it and I was still in college. And so,
So you didn't have like a job before?
no,
that you
I
were
mean,
like,
I've worked since I was 14.
Of course.
And my program was really, really interesting because it was like a cooperative program. And so I was getting my degree, but I also had to complete my degree. I had to do 5 different work placements at in different areas. And like so many of those gave me the tools for actually self-publishing the first book.
That's
like
cool.
the design jobs helped me like learn how to use Illustrator and InDesign, and you know, the web development jobs helped me like really master like the illustrations and that sort of thing.
That's cool.
But yeah, I was still, I think when it came out, I was in my last semester. And like, this was a moment, like, I thought nobody knew about it. So like, I secretly published it in the corner. And then I went to class the next day and was just like walking around. And like, eventually people just started to be like, yo, like, you did that. And then I was like, this is super embarrassing. Because like, I feel like I'm so honest in my work. And when we are, you know, at school or whatever areas, we really hide a lot of ourselves.
Sure.
Yeah.
I want to put you on the spot for a moment.
Okay.
And see what you can create. I want to ask you to either maybe you already have a poem memorized.
Oh no. Yeah. Okay.
Or just a message that you can turn into a poem.
Okay. I can't freestyle.
You can't freestyle? It's all written stuff? Well, it could be something that just, you know, already have then.
Okay.
Or a message.
Okay.
Anything. It can just be a message. It doesn't have to be a poem.
Okay, help me
For
out here.
women
Okay.
who maybe have gone through a similar experience as you, or have gone through a challenging relationship where they felt stuck and trapped.
Yeah.
For women who feel like they've been put down in certain ways in society, bullied, shamed, whatever it may be. Similar experiences that you felt.
Yeah.
What would you share with women? Whether it's just your own thoughts, a poem you want to make up on the spot.
Okay, so one thing I always share, because I'm really bad at making up poems on the spot, is that whether you have nothing or whether you have everything, there's hardships, I think, in everybody's lives. And everybody's going through them. But what always I've seen to be true and what helps me is like, we always go outside to find power and to really figure out the answers. But the power that you need and the answers that you need, guess what? Like, they're already in you. And you have to reach out and like, that is it. So you've come like pre-packaged with the answer and the powers to do anything you want. And you just got to grab it and run.
I love that one. And what about for humanity in general?
Oh no, there's so much happening.
What's a message you would say? Let's say this.
Yeah.
Let's say everyone
Yeah.
in the world
Yeah.
was able to listen to this right now.
It's,
And you could share a message with the world
I
about
think that
humanity.
one thing I've been trying to figure out how things could be better, how could things be different, and I think two things. I think we can listen a lot more and talk a little bit less. I think we should listen to each other and we should be kinder to each other. And I think those two things paired together will hopefully one day help us understand and accept one another. Because we are so different. And I know it's so cliche, but these things are cliche because they're true. We're also very similar. And so we need to listen more, shut up a little bit more, and be a lot nicer than we are.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
This is a question I ask at the end called the 3 truths.
Okay.
And imagine this is your last day many years from now.
Okay.
You've lived the life you want. You've written every poem, done all the artwork. Any dream you've had, you've made it come true.
Okay.
Had the perfect life
Yeah.
that you want.
Okay.
But for whatever reason, all the content you've ever created is erased. Art, poems, videos, gone.
Oh, okay.
And you have a piece of paper and a pen
Yeah.
to write down your 3
Yeah.
truths.
Okay.
The 3 things you know to be true or the lessons that you would leave behind to the rest of us. What would you say, again, I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
What would you say are your 3 truths?
I think about this often, actually.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. I would say, I don't know if these are going to be 3 things, but it's things that people have already said, so it's not original
What are
at
yours,
all.
though?
But for me, it's happiness is like the most important thing, and it does not come from any amount of success or any amount of money or any amount of fame. And so work on that.
Yeah.
And at the end of your life, like when I imagine myself at the end of my life, and I know this to be true, that these books and the things that I create or the things that I buy or whatever are not going to be the things that fill me. And I really hope at that point that I've really cultivated a relationship with myself and my loved ones and found happiness in that. And like that's what's going to complete me. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Those are great. Before I ask the final question, I want to acknowledge you for a moment, Rupi, for opening up, for sharing your voice with the world, for using your pain and making it into your purpose to inspire other people and to support so many men and women who are going through hard times, to give them that inspiration, that moment, that catalyst that can wake them up and move them forward in a more powerful, loving way. So I acknowledge you for sharing your gifts. Yeah. Make sure you guys get the book. The Sun and Her Flowers, really powerful, very inspiring. Check her out on Instagram. If you want to learn more, you can get more of a teaser there about her book. Where else can we connect with you? What else can we do? Where do you like to hang out online besides Instagram, your website?
I've been doing a lot of non-hanging out online, actually.
That's good.
Yeah, I used to hang out. Yeah, I used to be on the internet all the time. And it used to make me really upset when I got really busy because I had such a strong connection, like a one-on-one connection with like my Tumblr readers. And, you know, I was always like writing letters to them and this and that. But it's become so hard to do that in the online atmosphere. So now what I'm trying to do is figure out how to have that in real life. And that means trying to be in a healthy place where I can do as many shows as possible and like meet people. I think I just want to meet everybody and like hold their hands and be like, hey, like how's it going? Let's just crack some jokes and have a good time.
Sure.
And I'm trying to figure out how to do that. Like, yeah, that would be really
Do a book
cool.
tour.
I'm doing one, but
Okay.
even beyond that, I'm like, okay, how can we do better and bigger? And like, you know, I'm in Toronto, and our Toronto ticket sales went on sale. The show went on sale today, and I think we're basically out of tickets. And now I'm
Alright.
like telling my team, I'm gonna go back and tell them we need
biggest
to
space.
book the biggest space ever, and it needs to be free because I want all of Toronto there because I really want to just be able to give back and meet these wonderful people.
Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. Make sure you guys get the book. The final question is, what's your definition of greatness?
I think my definition of greatness is figuring out what you want and then working towards that, whatever that is, and being kind in how you do that. Like if you can do that, you can strive for whatever you want to do and be kind to the world around you, like you are great. Yeah.
Rupi, thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Appreciate it.